Hello everyone and welcome to the lecture on AWS Config. So this lecture will be containing all these topic. What is AWS Config, how AWS Config works and features of AWS Config. And those features are resource management, AWS Config rules, conformance packs, multi-account, multi-agent data aggregation and advanced query, and I will be explaining all of these features in detail. So what is AWS Config? AWS Config is a fully managed service that provides an inventory of your AWS resources and their configurations, making it easier to manage and track changes. The service continuously monitors and records the configurations of your AWS resources, ensuring you have up-to-date information about your infrastructure. AWS Config allows you to automate the evaluation of recorded configurations against desired configurations, helping you identify any discrepancies or non-compliant settings. With AWS Config, you can dive into detailed resource configuration histories and understand how resources are related to one another, facilitating troubleshooting and auditing. The service enables you to assess your overall compliance against the configurations specified in your internal guidelines, ensuring your resources adhere to organization's standards. Sixth, AWS Config allows you to specify custom rules for creating and configuring AWS services, giving you greater control over your infrastructure setup. The service provides a detailed view of the resources associated with your AWS account, including how they are configured, related to one another, and how their configurations and relationships have changed over time. So basically, just think of AWS Config as soon as you enable it, it will record everything, that all your resources and what are the configurations and settings, and as they change, it will keep the changes, what was changed and all at a central place. So just think like as a version control mechanism. So you can see the version history of your resources, how those settings have been changing, what was applied first, and what date something got changed, and also just think of a version control mechanism. But it's more like a detective. So you don't use this tool as a infrastructure as a code, which is CloudFormation, but you use this tool to understand who is changing what settings were changed, and how resources are related to another. Okay, how AWS Config works. AWS Config starts by discovering supported resources within your account and creates a configuration item for each. It generates configuration items for each resources when its configuration changes, maintaining history from the start of recording. AWS Config records and keep historical versions of each resource's configuration items. You can specify which resource types AWS Config should track, avoiding unnecessary tracking. Before tracking, it is important to check if the resource type is supported in your AWS region. AWS Config tracks changes to resources by making describe or list API calls, capturing all related resource configurations. Changes to resources and their related configurations are recorded and delivered to a Amazon S3 bucket. AWS Config also detects changes not initiated by API calls by examining resources periodically. Using AWS Config rules, the service continually evaluates resource configurations against desired settings and reports non-compliance or reports compliance. So features of AWS Config. You can specify which AWS resources AWS Config records for management and tracking. Second, you set up an Amazon S3 bucket for snapshots and history, and Amazon SNS for receiving notifications. AWS Config requires permissions to access the Amazon S3 bucket and Amazon SNS topic. Define rules for AWS Config to evaluate your resources and use conformance packs for group management. Aggregators collect data from multiple AWS accounts and regions into a single account and region. You can utilize sample or advanced query or write custom queries also to delve into your AWS resource configurations. Okay, first feature, resource management. So this one is the entities which are managed by AWS resources and includes EC2 instances and VPC, each identified uniquely through their ARN, Amazon resource name. a snapshot of a resource attribute at a point in time, including metadata and relationships. AWS Config updates these items upon resource changes. Configuration recorder stores resource configurations as items. It starts recording upon activation and can be customized to specific resource types. Configuration history compiles configuration items over time, helping in tracking changes and resource configuration history, and it's available in various formats including S3 delivery. Configuration snapshot provides a full picture of recorded resources and their configurations at a point in time, and you can use this for configuration validation as well. Then configuration stream, an up-to-date list of configuration changes for recorded resources, and this leverages Amazon SNS simple notification service for real-time updates and notifications. Then resource relationships maps out connections between resources like an EBS volume attached to an EC2 instances, and this one highlights any kind of dependency, interdependencies, or any kind of relationships between resources. Next feature, AWS Config rules. AWS Config rules represent the desired configuration settings for specific AWS resources or entire AWS accounts, helping maintain compliance. AWS Config evaluates resources against rules and flags them as compliant, non-compliant, error, or not applicable. Non-compliant resources trigger notifications via Amazon SNS. AWS offers a set of predefined and customizable rules called AWS Config Managed Rules, which can be easily implemented to enforce best practices and compliance standards. Users can create custom rules from scratch using AWS Lambda functions. AWS Config custom Lambda rules or guard duty or guard a policy as code language. AWS Config custom policy rules for tailored compliance checks. So basically there are two types which are like managed rules. One using Lambda or guard, which is a technology for policy as a code. Fifth one, trigger types. AWS Config evaluations are triggered by configuration changes when resources match the rule scope periodically at a specified frequency. So these are the trigger type based on the configuration change or periodically or a combination of both, hybrid. Evaluation modes. So proactive evaluation assesses resource properties before deployment, while detective evaluation examines the configuration settings of existing resources. Proactive rules do not remediate or prevent non-compliant resources from being deployed. So next feature, conformance packs. Conformance packs are a single entity that contains a set of AWS config rules and remediation actions, making it easier to manage compliance. Conformance packs can be deployed in a single account, AWS account and region, or across an entire organization in AWS organizations. To create a conformance pack, users author or users write a YAML template that lists the AWS config managed or conformance custom rules and remediation actions to be included. Fourth, conformance packs can be deployed using AWS Config Console or the CLI. AWS provides sample conformance pack templates that users can use to quickly get started and evaluate their AWS environment. Users can create custom conformance packs from scratch based on their unique needs, which allows for tailored collections of AWS config rules and remediation actions. Process checks, a type of AWS config rule, can be added to a conformance pack to track external and internal tasks that require verification, enabling comprehensive compliance tracking in a single location. So just to summarize, all the rules come into something called as packs. So you have your own AWS provided rules and custom rules, and you can bundle that in a pack, and AWS also provide a lot of conformance packs out of the box. But you can always create your custom conformance pack, and that can also include either your own custom rule or AWS managed rules as well. Okay, next feature is multi-account, multi-region data aggregation in AWS Config. AWS Config's multi-account, multi-region data aggregation feature allows you to collect configuration and compliance data from multiple AWS accounts and regions into a single account. This feature is particularly beneficial for central IT administrators who need to monitor compliance across multiple AWS accounts within an enterprise. A source account can be an individual AWS account or an organization in AWS organizations from which you want to aggregate AWS config data. A source region is the AWS region from which you want to aggregate AWS configuration and compliance data. Next is an aggregator. An aggregator is a new resource type. So it's a new resource type in AWS config that collects configuration and compliance data from multiple source accounts and regions. You create an aggregator in the region where you want to view the aggregated data. So it's in the target region where you want to see the aggregated data. Aggregators provide a read-only view into the source accounts and regions by replicating data from the source accounts into the aggregator account. They do not provide mutating access, meaning you cannot deploy rules or push snapshot files through an aggregator. Using aggregators in AWS Config does not incur any additional cost. As a source account owner, you need to grant permissions to an aggregator account and region to collect your AWS config data if you are not aggregating source accounts that are part of AWS organization. So this is only applicable if this is a first standalone account. So let's say some other account wants to aggregate my data and I am the owner, I am the source account owner. So then I have to grant some permissions because my account and let's say your account is not part of a single organization. So in that case, you have to grant permission. But if it is multiple accounts within an AWS organization setup, then you don't have to do this grant permission step. Okay, advanced query. AWS config allows you to query the current configuration state of AWS resources based on configuration properties. You can perform queries for a single account and region or multiple accounts and regions. Advanced query enables you to run ad hoc property-based queries against current AWS resource state metadata across a list of resources that AWS config supports. The advanced query feature provides a single query endpoint and a powerful query language to get current resource state metadata without performing service-specific describe API calls. Configuration aggregators can be used to run the same queries from a central account across multiple accounts and regions. And use cases. So advanced query can be used for inventory management tasks such as retrieving a list of Amazon EC2 instances of a particular size. You can use advanced query to retrieve a list of resources that have a specific configuration property enabled or disabled. Advanced query can help with cost optimization by identifying a list of Amazon EBS volumes that are not attached to any EC2 instances. You can retrieve a list of all your conformance packs and their compliance status using advanced query, helping you in compliance data management. And that's all. Thanks for watching.